People are afraid of being diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
People are afraid of that label being attached and all that. But I want to change people's viewpoint in, if you understand what it is and you understand how your body and your brain operates, it's actually a beautiful thing. Because I used to be like that too, like, no labels. I hate labels. But I don't know what's in a can of peas unless it got a label on it. A label helps me identify that that's a can of peas, right? And so labels aren't necessarily bad. How we perceive them can be bad, right? What are we assigning to that thing?
Welcome to The Reframe, from the couch to the conversation, where we dive deep into the human experience of healing and transformation, giving you the knowledge, skills, and resources to not only manage the increasing stress of the world, but center you into your sense of self so you can be the change that you want to see in the world. I am your host, Rebecca Molman, trauma therapist turned coach. Today's conversation is all about breaking the stigma of mental health in marginalized and disenfranchised communities with Shawnell Batiste, your favorite no bullshit therapist. Shawnell is a licensed professional therapist who specializes in providing access to mental health services to marginalized and disenfranchised populations. She is a coach, speaker, author, and leader in her own community. Shawnell empowers her clients and everyone around her to choose to do the work necessary so they can heal and become the best and highest versions of themselves while also building healthy relationships. This conversation is dynamic and insightful, to say the least. We also talk about the mindset of self-worth, diagnosis and identity, anxiety, ADHD, and bipolar, as well as reframing your mental health struggles as a superpower. There is so much to cover in this episode, so let's dive in. Well, Shawnell, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here this morning, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation through the lens that you speak as far as a coach and a therapist, a licensed therapist, on the marginalized and disenfranchised communities and being such a active support system for them and their access to mental health care.
Absolutely.
Welcome, and I would love for you to just say hi and share a little bit about your past so listeners have
Okay.
some framework around that.
Well, thank you for having me. First of all, I appreciate it. And I am Shawnell Batiste, your favorite no bullshit therapist. And I have adopted that name just because of how I operate and who I am as a person and as a therapist. I knew I wanted to be a therapist when I was 7. I didn't know therapy per se. I think I said I want to be a child psychiatrist or something. Probably something I saw on TV. But I knew that they would be this frame of helping people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that came from, my own stuff. Growing up in a household where I was the oldest child of 3. And I can tell my parents were not happy, and we definitely were not happy. And once they got divorced, that showed how unhappy everybody was, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so just throughout life, throughout the years, I always say that this is a gift. It's definitely a gift. Everybody can't do it. But I nurtured that gift and studied what I knew I needed to study, in spite of people in college going, you shouldn't study psychology because you can't make money at that. I stood firm. I stood firm in what I knew I wanted to do and carried forth and got my degrees. It took me 13 years to get a 4-year degree. Just life, man. You know,
Yeah.
um, chasing the boys, doing dumb stuff and all that. But I finished. I finally finished. It took me a few more years before I was able to want to go back to school after all of that and get my master's degree. In between there, I had lots of work in the field, though. Lots and lots of work in the field. And I worked in group homes. I worked in treatment centers. Anywhere that I could do mental health work, I did. And it was just direct care. And it was great work. It was very great work. But I learned so much about how systems operate and how much things are set up for us to fail and how it's a money game, and that was disheartening. That was very disheartening. And so rather than work for someone else, I decided at some point that I would need to open my own practice because I saw the areas that needed the help. And I was the employee that always got in trouble for giving them what they actually needed. It's hard to fight against those systems within those systems, right? And so I decided to do my own private practice once I got my license and all that, and start figuring out how I can do it individually and create those type of environments to be able to create a community that really wants to help. And despite whatever the systems are, we're going to do what we can to help at the ground level, right? Yeah. And it takes a lot. It takes a whole lot. It's tough work, it's what we would call grassroots, right? Like you're on the ground and you're talking directly to the people, right? And I think that's what changed my trajectory also with not becoming a psychiatrist, because I've even considered that because we need a lot more prescribers as well. But what I learned through those systems and working in those places is that the psychiatrists had like 15, 20 minutes with the kids, and they listen for a minute, write a prescription, and you're out of here. I want to talk to the people. I want to get to the root of the problem and not just try to come up with quick solutions. I want solutions that tackle the root, right? So we can actually work on the problem.
So I think that's a really common experience, especially for mental health providers in systems. We kind of end up in systems, especially when we're like internship or getting the hours, and they are a lot of times disheartening, I think, once you realize that it's not about that kiddo that's sitting in front of you. It's about maintaining the infrastructure of that system. Right. And oftentimes very much about money. How were you able to redefine your relationship in your private practice and let the system aspect fall away? Or was there any stickiness to being able to let the system fall?
It was actually pretty easy because my exit from systemic and system things, I was working for an agency where it was basically therapeutic foster care. Me and my ex-husband acted as parents in the home with the kids. And so we wound up losing that job. And in losing that job, we just kind of let go of all of the things that were encompassing the system crap, right? As a matter of fact, like we used to, and I think they really got rid of us because we had a 97% success rate of kids leaving our house. We were changing the lives of these kids, but it don't make money. It doesn't make money for them to, understand their medication and understand how their behaviors are impacting their lives, and people are profiting from it. And we were talking to our kids about it, man. We was talking about it. So we were able to, once we left that job, we had made such an impact that the caseworker for one of our sibling groups called us and asked if we was doing foster care. And so we're like, yeah, that's what we're trying to do, right? And so we wind up fostering them, actually doing kinship care, because the company had also, I guess you call it, blacklisted us. So it was hard for us to even get licensed for foster care after that. And so, but it didn't stop anything. The caseworker called and said, hey, I'll put them in your house under kinship care. This is the most successful they've been the entire time they've been in the system. And I'm like, well, bring them on. And so we took those two girls. They had a sibling that we had already met, and we invited her to come. And so we had the sibling group, and we were talking one day and talking about them in future tense. And in doing that, I was like, hey, these ain't our kids. These are kids of the state, and we can't make future plans for them. The only way we can do that is to adopt them. And so we decided to adopt them, right? Wow. And we adopted those three. And we had one child that was aging out of foster care, which also became my heart learning through her. I'm like, what do they do when they leave the system, right? And stuff. And she tried to live with some family members, and that didn't work out. And so we took her in. So she was ours, right? And then one other child that we adopted right before her 18th birthday. These kids have become ours. They lived in our house with us for like 3 years, And so it was all natural to just take them with us, basically. And there was one other child we wanted to adopt, but her parental rights wasn't terminated. But we just stayed in touch with her and made sure she was okay. But like we ended up with 5 extra girls in our house, and we already had 2, you know. And so that's kind of that breakaway. That was the breakaway. It was like, I'm doing this for real. This is my family now, right? Forget the system stuff. Forget all that. Like, we're a forever family now. We're going to operate as a family unit. You know, no foster this or caseworker that or none of that stuff. We have to teach them how to live like that because they had been in and out of the system for a while, right? And that took work and time and love and patience. Want to pull your hair out. But I think we did a pretty good job. I think we did a pretty good job. And so, and for them all to be teenagers as well.
And a lot of females in one space.
I used to tell my ex-husband all the time, just bless you being in the house with all these girls. Even when we had a dog, the dog was even a girl. So it was a lot for him. You know, he had to learn a lot about females. A lot about it. But he survived. He survived. But I think that was the breakaway. I don't think I had an issue. It was easy for me to step out of that and start living, because this is like my life, right? When I say this is a gift for me, this is not, and my best friend says that all the time. She's like, this isn't your job. This is who you are. It's how you operate, right? And because of that, it's easy for me, right? As a matter of fact, my kids have to stop me and say, hey, I don't need you to be a therapist right now. I need you to be my mom, right? That's how ingrained it is. And much because of my own trauma. I learned a lot. I know a lot. I feel a lot. And so I'm able to, and not that I don't need my own therapist, because I have my own therapist. I can't necessarily fix myself and stuff, but it helps me to have a full understanding. And because I've been there, and even the communities that I serve, I'm a part of most of those communities, or I know somebody really close to me that I know the intricate details of the thing. And there's some things that you just have to experience in order to get it, you know?
Yeah.
And so,
well, and being able to be a support for marginalized and disenfranchised communities, it takes your own history with that. And it requires you stepping in a way that might look very different than another population. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about just bringing a little bit of definition to those communities. And I just in our conversation a while ago, realizing that one of the things I walked away from was realizing that we walk as disenfranchised people without even knowing it.
Without even knowing it. Exactly.
Without even knowing it. So I would love for you to just run with that.
Yeah. And I mentioned recently, I just did my first recording for my podcast. And within that, I mentioned, unless you're a cisgendered, white, heterosexual male, you're probably a part of a disenfranchised community. For the most part, right? Because as women, we've been disenfranchised. As black women, as Hispanic women, as, you know, so you can like break in it, all of that down. There's so much intersectionality with all of it. Like I'm a part of several of the communities that I serve. One of those being the black community. And everybody knows that story, even though they want to keep it out of the history books. But everybody knows that story. And because of that, I gotta serve us, right? And we have a tendency as black people, don't you tell nobody what's going on in my house, right? And so we keep secrets within the families, and rightfully so, because we haven't been able to trust the healthcare system. We haven't been able to trust the government. There's not a system we've been able to trust to take care of us. So we keep it all to ourselves. So that's one reason for me to sit behind the desk and say, okay, I am a part of you, so let's get it done, right? LGBTQ community, I'm a part of that community as well. And again, another community that's shunned, and don't come over here with that. Oh, you have an agenda. Not that every community in the small pieces and the people at the top may have an agenda. But personally, I just want to love who I want to love, right? And be able to be who I want to be with and have the freedom to do that. So there's stigma there, right? And where can, the community go and be accepted and not be discriminated against and That's hard. It's very, very hard. And it's a hard thing to try to learn to be in that skin and in that beingness, right? Yourself, right? Because we're all inundated with what's right and what's wrong, right? And so most kids are like, I didn't discover my bisexuality until I was like 25, 26 years old. And of course, because I lived in a time that I couldn't say it even if I felt it, right? And so because of that, it took me a long time to be like, I am interested in some other things. But it took for me to reach a certain point in my life in order to be like, yeah, and I don't care, who knows, whatever, right? But as a kid, I couldn't imagine without support, like heavy support. Like I give my kids heavy support, and they both are part of the community, my biological children. And so when they were coming out and talking about, it's normal conversation in my house, right? And so it was easy for them to talk about those things and navigate and figure out who they are and how they are and what they like and who they like. Because I'm like, cool, that's part of the process. I'm like, you need to be with a man. And so it made it a bit easier for them. They still have to go through their struggles. They're figuring their things out. It made it a little bit easier. As a foster and adoptive parent, I understood now the struggles of the foster and adoptive child and the parent, right? Because and I've noticed that a lot of adoptive communities, especially if you don't know, like you look at the images on TV, oh, we're adopting this cute little baby. It's going to be great. They're going to love me forever. And so there's this image of what adoption looks like, right? It's not like that. Even an infant has trauma when they're taken away from their parent. They lived 9 months in this body where they listened to this one heartbeat that kept them alive, right? And then now it's gone. It's completely gone. Just teaching how to cope with those things and how to love this child through everything, and that you have to have dealt with your own stuff, because they're going to bring it out you. They're going to bring it out, just like when you get married. That bring it out you. You know, all the flaws, all the things, all the issues you didn't think you had, they're going to bring it out you. You know, and so you got to be taking care of all of that in your whole self. And lastly, like my formerly incarcerated communities, that's been recent. That's been the last few years that I became attached to that, because I had a friend who had been formerly incarcerated and he was trying to get his life together, and he couldn't. He couldn't because none of his mental health issues were addressed. He's walking out into a system where you can't get a job, you can't get an apartment, you know, and so no matter how hard he tried, and he's like, I'm not going back to jail. I got an electrician's license, and you know, so he's trying to, but like every turn, it kept hitting him hard, and eventually he ended his life by cop. He tried to commit suicide by, you know, ingesting pills, and that didn't work, and eventually he, you know, he knew how he could die. He knew how he could die, right? And stuff. And that was a sad, sad moment for me, because we both attached ourselves to each other at a time. We both was really sad and depressed, and we was really good friends and lifted each other up and so on. And it made me feel helpless, so helpless. And so, but I recognized sitting with him the last few weeks of his life, like how much better he could have been, even to address his mental health issues. And he was telling me all of his stories from childhood, and I was like, man, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's why you ended up in jail to begin with, because those things weren't addressed. And so I was like, something else needs to happen with that population as well, where we are taking care of their mental health as they exit and try to come back out and make another life for themselves. Like, people don't want to be in jail. And people don't want to live that life, right? And I just watched a YouTube short the other day that this gentleman was talking about how that's on his record for life. He have to live that for life. He can't go on a field trip with his kid. They can't adopt a baby if they want to. So he's over a mistake he made as a kid, probably due to a mental health issue. And now for life, he's gotten himself together. He's paid, you know, his debt to society and all. And he still can't live freely. And so that's why my heart is where it is for those communities, for those particular communities, because they all are close to me. And I know I have the capacity to come up with something, to come up with some way, shape, or form to be able to help in those arenas, with a lot of help from other people, because I know I can't do it by myself.
Well, it really is glaringly obvious to me that there's not just the individual care that needs to happen and attentiveness to the individual traumas, but also a complete system overhaul,
Yeah.
because the systems that are in place are not there in the best interest of that said community.
Right. Absolutely. But it's hard to change the system because the
Mm-hmm.
system is benefiting from the incarceration. It's all money. It's all money. And I got a lot from Dr. Angela Davis last night. It was awesome. Just us to be able to build a community of our own and create small, tiny systems, if you will, that actually work, right? Because it's hard for us to and we're always going to be doing our best trying to beat the system and fight the system and all that. That's going to be always. In the meantime, though, we got to be on the ground and seeing how we can band together as people and create programs that do help, right? Because we can't depend on the system to change in order to change a thing. We have to create that change within ourselves. So I need to get with some more therapists and some more people. And so how can we create something that's going to make this work for this particular person? Do I need to connect to a job site that is interested in serving this community? Well, we hire ex-convicts. Cool. You know what I'm saying? So, that's how we try to get that thing going, to get in the community together to serve them. Do I have to buy an apartment complex that serves that community and says, okay, conflict or not, okay, and here's what you need to do to be sure of that thing? I don't know what the solution is right now, but I know it has to be at that level where individuals are getting together and creating something for them, because we cannot depend on the system as it stands now. It's not created for that.
Something that I remember you sharing before was the importance of also addressing mindset. And I think that word gets thrown around quite a bit, but it's an important conversation to be had, because until we change the way we see ourselves and how we fit into the world, we will forever be subject to I believe, invisible prisons, like our own invisible prison. So from the work that you've done, how do we shift our perspective? How do we shift our mindset to be able to change the world, to change our communities, to change our family structures?
I think we've been inundated with feelings of low self-worth, no value, trying to fit in. I need to be like everybody else. I need to fit the status quo. This is right. That's wrong. And so we struggle with a lot of fear, doubt, and guilt. So even when we're in positions where we're doing the right thing, or we feel like we're doing the right thing, we're shamed for it, we're shunned for it, and so on. That is the mindset. The mindset is like, I'm not worthy of XYZ. Dot dot dot. And so if I'm not worthy, I'm not gonna fight for it. I'm gonna accept whatever comes. I'm gonna tolerate BS, right? And so my effort in helping people get better, it usually comes from changing the mindset of their self-worth, right, and their value, right? Because if we feel like we are worth something, if we feel like we value ourselves, then you stand up, right? You're like, I'm worth better than this. What the hell? We do it in relationships. We do it with jobs, everything, like everything. Again, it's beneficial for us not to be individuals. It's beneficial for us not to feel good about ourselves. Because if I feel good about myself, then I'm going to go to this job and I'm going to wear myself out for this money so I can pay these bills to get in this big house that they say I should have, to take care of my kids and give them the Xbox that they say that they should have, And so it's all these ideals, right? Rather than coming up with ourselves, deciding for ourselves, like, what do I want? What do I like? Do I really want a big old mansion? Or I just want a little cottage next to a river, And of course, that's seen as like, you want to live in a cottage next to a river with trees? Yeah, with trees. But catering to not what they're feeding us and telling us we should like or want, like really searching within yourself and getting to know yourself. And I recognized that for myself a little while ago, where I was like, we always like, oh, I want a big old house. I gotta clean a big old house. Oh, I gotta hire a housekeeper, right? Because I don't want to clean it up. Can I get a smaller space so I don't have to clean a lot? Again, comes with recognizing like who you are, how you operate, how you navigate this world, and all that. And once you develop, and I watch people grow in that way, right? That once they start to feel good about themselves, once they start, you know what? I do deserve not to be talked to crazy. So, boundaries, right? And when I say it spans across everything, because I did a TikTok the other day. I had a bill collector call, right? Now, before, I'd have been like highly emotional and, oh my God, or whatever. And I just, hey, yeah, no, I ain't got it right now. But when I have it, I'll send it to you. And I'm going to go online and I'm going to go ahead and, no, you can't take it out of my account because I'm not sure exactly when it's going to be there. Yeah, no, you can't take, and I had to keep repeating the same thing to this man because all he kept doing was trying to push the date further and further back. No, sir, I said XYZ. This is how I said I was going to pay. Okay, I'm going to hang up the phone now because I don't think you're listening. Yeah, I appreciate you following your script, but I don't think you're listening to me, so I'm going to end my phone call. Boundary. Boom, done. And I felt fine, right? So in every area, that's how detailed and the little things matter too, right? And it's because of my self-value and worth now, right? That I don't have to stay on the phone with this man. I don't have to get all up in arms. I know he's just doing his job. But no, you're not going to pressure me into doing something I already said I'm not going to do. Goodbye. Click, click. Right? And so developing a sense of value and worth within us. And like for the Black community, like I go everywhere with this big old afro, right? And stuff. And some people think it's absolutely gorgeous and other people leer at me, you know. I don't care. I like it. And that's what matters, is that I like it. I appreciate every compliment and I love the compliments because it makes people feel good, right? The butterflies make people feel good and they say that. But I like it. That's what's important, that I like it. So if tomorrow I decide I'm not wearing my hair like this anymore and I'm going to wear another way, that I like it. That's what's important, is that I like it. And it took me a long time to get to that level and that point where I am okay in my body. I am okay with my size. I am okay with who I am as a person. And if somebody doesn't like it, that's a them problem, right? As long as I am doing no harm to anybody else. My best friend has a phrase that I love, and she says, give no fucks, but do no harm. And I'm like, I love that. I live by that, right? Because I'm not going to allow you to change who I am, right? And I'm going to be myself, but I'm not going to inflict harm upon anybody else, and I'm not going to infringe upon anybody else's free will.
Can you say that one more time?
Give no fucks, do no harm.
That needs to be a bumper sticker.
I'm telling you, I'm putting it on a t-shirt. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if she stole it from somebody else, but that is her phrase all day. I love her so much because she's like, yeah, like, we just can't, you know, because she also comes from a background where she's learning to love herself unconditionally, right? And in much of our relationship has been that, like, really pumping each other up and talking about all the things. It's the most honest relationship I've ever had because we literally talk about all the things. Her anxiety is at, like, time to the 10th power a lot of times. And a strategy that we came up with a couple of years ago was naming it. Put a name to it, like an actual name. So we call her anxiety Gina. And so, I don't know if you watch Martin, but she's like, Gina, damn, Gina. So every time Gina's tripping, we're like, damn, Gina. But she says calling it by name like that separates it from herself, right? Mm-hmm. And so I am not my anxiety. My anxiety is Gina. She's a frenemy, right? She pretends to act like she wants to help me, but she doesn't. She just wants to remind me of all the bad things that are out there, whether they're real or imagined, right? And so when Gina is bothering her, she walks into the room and like, hey, Gina tripping. I'm like, what is that heifer saying today? And well, she said that we wasn't going to be best friends no more and that you didn't really like me that much. And it's all because you're here watching my kids. And I'm like, well, the kids do suck. But tell Gina, in order to have you, I got to take care of these kids for you because that's our arrangement. That's our agreement. So, sorry, Gina, I'm not going nowhere. Right? So tell Gina, go sit down. And just verbalizing that for her puts all of the anxiety like to the back seat. Will Gina try to come back? Absolutely. She'll find some other reason to rear her ugly head. But we know exactly how to handle that. And so now we've been roommates for a couple of years now. And so now we both, and I have my own, because I call mine Sharkeisha. And so when those anxieties come up, we talk about them freely so that it takes the power away from it, right?
Oh, yes. That's a huge piece, is just being able to put language to and not run and be afraid of the hard stuff that is inside. I think so much that's part of repression, is taking your voice, taking your autonomy away. And we do it to ourselves. We get small and we hide and we isolate because of all that shame and guilt. And the moment someone can just sit with you and hold space big enough for you to to come out of the shadows and to say, oh, all of you is accepted.
That's right.
Let's figure
That's
it out.
right. Your anxiety, your depression, your bipolar, whatever it is. I have another friend of mine. He's CEO of Meta Association. And so we work a lot together. And as friends, as like I call him my brother, because I have a bipolar diagnosis and so does he. And I have bipolar 2 diagnosis, he has a bipolar 1 diagnosis. Just to have somebody that calls and says, hey, you good? Right? You know, manic today or no? What you doing about it? Are you getting rest? Are you eating? Right? And I don't have to explain what it feels like and what it looks like and how it is, because we struggling with the same disorder, right? And stuff. And I know the symptoms of his and he understands the symptoms of mine. And so when if I see him posting too many videos in a row, I'm like, you manic? You good? Or he's like, no, I'm just on fire right now. And just being able to ride that manic wave if you need to. But making sure that you're still eating, you're getting rest, you know how to bring it down, you know how to, are you taking your medications, are you eating well, are you doing your supplements, are you exercising? All of those holistic things. It's because it's all of the things, not just one thing, right? But it's great to have somebody that understands it and I ain't got to explain it. And he could just call and say, hey, you good? Or he's like, you okay? Or I call him back and be like, you good? You know, simple stuff, but makes a big, humongous difference. A humongous difference, you know. And it's seeing you understanding the disorder, but seeing you outside of it.
Yep.
You know, seeing you outside of that thing. My 22-year-old has borderline personality disorder. You know, and something I swore off as a student I would never, ever fool with. And then, as the universe would have it, my daughter has it. So he's like, you will fool with it. and so, here you go. Thank you. But I learned, now I know everything about it from the inside of it, right? And all that. And even, and I tell people when I'm meeting with them, like, people are afraid of being diagnosed. People are afraid of that label being attached and all that. But I want to change people's viewpoint in, if you understand what it is and you understand how your body and your brain operates, it's actually a beautiful thing. Because I used to be like that too, like, no labels. I hate label. But I don't know what's in a can of peas unless it got a label on it. A label helps me identify that that's a can of peas, right? And so labels aren't necessarily bad. How we perceive them can be bad, right? What are we assigning to that thing? When my daughter learned of her BPD, and I gave her the diagnostic manual, and I was like, look that up right quick. Tell me what you think. And she's reading, and she's reading. She was like, they might as well put my picture next to this thing. But it gave her relief because she thought she was broken. She thought something's wrong with me. Now she's like, oh, it's not me. I'm not inherently flawed. Here's a condition that matches my thing, and here's some things I can do about it. And it's because of this thing. So how can I manage the thing, right? And all that. And so it's taken her a little bit, like it takes a while. But now she's learning to manage it, right? Because she can recognize, and one of her things was the rejection deal. Everything feels like rejection. And even in her relationship with me, when I would fuss at her about something and she's getting in trouble, she's like, Mama, every time you do that, My BPD says, again, taking it away from her outside herself, my BPD
Mm-hmm.
says that I ain't shit. And I was like, oh, well, that's not what I'm trying to say. So I started compliment sandwiching her and like, hey, I need to talk to you about something. First of all, I'm not trying to say you're not shit. Matter of fact, you are the shit. Okay, so let's talk about this thing, right? And hugs and love afterward, because I know physical touch is her love language, right? So afterward, we get a big hug, and so sandwich that thing, right? And so she was able to receive it better. So again, that community, right? If somebody understands what the disability is or what the disorder is and how it operates, then they can adjust. That's just a small adjustment. Just a very small adjustment in how I delivered my message to her so that she could receive it and not freak out and feel like I didn't love her anymore.
Just learning how her language. I mean, even
Yeah.
as simple as languages piece, learning
Yes.
how someone receives that information.
Right. Right.
Mm.
Very, very, very important. Yeah, and having all the kids that I have, every kid's different. Everybody's different. I had one that was a crier. Oh, and my ex-husband used to get up in arms because he's a guy, and he's like,
Mm.
"But she's crying." I was like, "She gonna cry every time you talk to her. She don't like what you're saying," and that's her response. Allow her to cry. There's nothing wrong with tears, and continue to give the consequence. Stick to your guns, because it's not necessarily a manipulate. They can use it for manipulation, but it's not necessarily manip. It's just how she responds. I used to be a crybaby too. My mama said every time somebody looked at me too long, I was crying. And I learned how to, because my mama did not move from that. The consequence was the consequence. Whether I felt it was fair or not, it was the consequence. Whether I was crying or not, it was the consequence.
So the going back to what you were saying before with that sense of self, learning your sense of self and who am I, and what I see clients struggle with a lot, especially with diagnosis, big diagnoses, is that they encapsulate their sense of identity around that diagnosis. That diagnosis
Mm,
can definitely bring a sense of, oh, I'm not crazy and I'm not alone. There's other people that feel like this, and this is a shared experience in this, sect of people. But I think the piece that we're missing and would be good to maybe attend to a little bit more as therapists even is to empower in that diagnosis. So it's just
absolutely.
like you owning your amazing hair and the butterflies, it is owning those parts of ourselves that struggle with abandonment, that struggle with manic
Yes.
versus depressive, right? So it's that loves the cuddles more than it does words of affirmation. It's all connected and it's all very similar. And it really boils down to, can I look at myself square in the eyes and say, I love you unconditionally and I
That's right.
accept you. And let's rock this.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, yeah, thank you. Because I had, like, my diagnosis of ADHD. Like, and only since I really been since 2020 when I started doing the business stuff. And I'm
Yep.
like, how come I have 125 tabs open all the time and I can't seem to get anything done, but I'm always doing something? Like, I don't know. And then I'm Googling, can bipolar and ADHD live in the same brain? And so realizing some of my symptoms that I thought was bipolar symptoms are really ADHD symptoms. And so like, then my life made sense again, right? Because I'm like, oh, this is why I was struggling with this, and this, and I never could get notes done. And I know on average, therapists don't like doing notes, but like I am ridiculous, right? And so, learning as much as I can about how the ADHD brain works. This can be a disorder or it could be a superpower, right? Because it can be a superpower. So I started creating systems for myself and doing more research on things and TikTok University because, oh my gosh, us sharing things on TikTok about just our everyday. Look, here's an ADHD hack that I learned, and then trying that thing and see if it works for you. And so yeah, that's an embracing thing. And because I live in the home where everybody is neurodivergent, right? And so learning stuff like the fact that we sing when we're stemming, right? And we're singing and making up
Mhm.
songs and stuff. And I just couldn't, and my future son-in-law is not neurodivergent. And so sometimes he has to keep track of a conversation, right? We was talking about that. Thanks for bringing me back. But he understands it because he's around us all the time, right? And so because he understands it and we understand how our brains work. And then now we're not mad at each other for certain things, right? When we discover new things, we share them with each other. Me and my daughter talked earlier about parroting, because she's like, I sing stuff that my friends say, or I repeat things that my friends say, and it drives them crazy. And I was like, that's part of ADHD and stuff. Somebody starts a beat in this house or starts making up a song about spaghetti because we're making spaghetti, and then everybody adds their little piece in, and we've made a song. I told them we're gonna make a greatest hits album. But learning those things about us, like, it makes things less annoying. When I interrupt in the middle of a conversation, or we're gonna have a family meeting, but we need something to hold on to so we can not interrupt. We have Post-it notes. Everybody has a pen and Post-it note, so that when that thought hits your head, you don't interrupt the person, you write it down. So you coming up with these strategies on how we gonna get stuff done. I know I have whiteboards everywhere in my room because I gotta write stuff down. I came up with the strategy of having a notebook next to me, so that when the thoughts hit my head, I don't stop to try to do it. I just write it down, and I have a running list. And I'm not intimidated by that list, because I might get it done, I might not. I just need to get it out of my head so I won't do it and interrupt what I'm doing and complete my task. Learned about timers and just so many things. But like you said, it's embracing it, though. It's not being frustrated. And it can get frustrating. My most frustrating thing about ADHD is losing things in the ether. When you put the object permanence problem. Where did I put my keys? I know I had my keys. My keys were in my hand. I'm looking, and they're in my pocket. But in my head, I felt my pocket. That's the most annoying part for me. But I've learned how to, like, embrace it, right? And learn my strategies for it and use it as a superpower. I had a phone call a little bit before, and she was talking so fast, and I was loving it because we was getting through it real fast. But I had another, it was a webinar, not a webinar, it was the informational thingy for this class I'm taking and all that. I actually embarrassed myself because the mic was still on. And I'm like, oh, she's talking so slow. I had to apologize. But, like, it was just my ADHD, because it was moving at a pace that I was getting no dopamine at all, right? Mm-hmm. And stuff. I realized I have to physically read a book and listen to it at the same time. I thought I didn't like reading, because growing up, I could never finish a book. And my mom and my sister used to run through books. And I thought I did. I was like, I don't like reading, because I never finish anything. But come to find out, I wasn't getting enough dopamine. I was losing myself in the page or something. But then when I put the audio and that, and I was like, well, how did I get through school? Well, in elementary school, we would go around the class and read it out loud, and you'd have your paragraph, your report you're supposed to read. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, that makes sense, because people are reading it and I'm following it. That's how I finished it in school. And so I figured out how to navigate life, not knowing it and all. But now that I know, and I got all this information now, yes, now I can really master this thing. So I definitely believe it's like embracing the thing. And I even like with my daughter with a BPD, like, she embraces that that's a part of her. Yeah. And just learning how to navigate it and figuring out. And she used hers as a superpower, right? Because somebody said something to me that was really mean. And she's like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. She's like, no, you're not. Your feelings are hurt. And I was like, oh, you're right. My feelings are hurt. She was like, I use my BPD as a superpower, because when they said that, I was like, ooh, that hurt. And they wasn't even talking to me. Oh, wait, they was talking to Mama. So it was her ability to be able to connect there, right? And stuff. So we just got to use it, like, use all of it. I think even depression can be used in a certain way. When I was in a deep depression, I praised myself out of that depression. You know, if I got up and brushed my teeth, girl, good job brushing your teeth. And stuff. So every little step I made, I gave myself some praise for it. And I think that goes a long way. Being proud of yourself rather than staying in the abyss. Being proud of yourself of what you're accomplishing and what you're doing. Baby steps.
Absolutely. Well, Shawnell, I wanted to make sure that we had time to chat about your podcast that has come out. Is that correct?
Yeah. I posted it Sunday or Monday or something. I sat in front of the computer for 2 hours going, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. You talk to people all day. You can do this. And even just saying that out loud, right? Because it was something new. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? I always talk. But it was something new. It was something new, right? And so I was allowed to have anxiety about doing something different and something new and all that. I just did a little trailer, so that's all that's out right now. It's called FTBS, which is fuck the bullshit. And the goal is to create a community of people who can, with no bullshit, be themselves and talk about their stuff. The same thing we're talking about now, just being able to talk about the anxiety and talk about the depression and talk about how you got through it, or are you still in it and you need some support and some help, or what's your journey like, and then from every aspect, because like I said, mental health is connected to every part of our lives, right? And getting people, especially people who are not used to talking about that stuff, who have not been comfortable traditionally from families or communities in talking about their stuff, giving them a safe space to talk about the things. I want to interview any and everybody that want to come, because I just want us to have a space where we can just be ourselves and talk about every part of us, because I think people don't believe that they can be embraced, but they can. We all going through something. We all dealing with something, right? We are more alike than we are different. You know, we have our individuality, but we are more alike than we are different. And just in the human experience, and heck, in the spiritual experience, we are truly connected in the spiritual experience. And so I just want people to have a space where they can talk about it freely and we can have fun. And we can joke about our depression. And we can, like, it doesn't have to be doom and gloom. And let's just talk about it. Let's talk about it. And I think that's the way for us to heal from it.
I think also that it just dawned on me is also destigmatizing the fact that your therapist also probably struggles with anxiety and depression a lot of the time.
Hello! Duh!
Right? Or
I had 1,000 people say, and my daughter says that too. She's like, people assume because my mom's a therapist that I don't have problems. And I'm like, no, you probably got more. Because now you got to deal with your mom who's being a therapist all the time. You know, but like, yeah, like we all deal. And I think that's what makes me, I think, genuine and authentic with people. Because, you know, in school, they're like, no disclosure. Do not tell people anything about yourself. But what if they just ask if I have kids? Don't tell them about the kids. You're just supposed to sit there and be stoic, smile and nod. But what if it's a situation that doesn't require smiling and nod? Just smile and nod. But seeing your therapist as a human helps you to connect to them. And so when I say, hey, I've had depression and I have been at the edge and wanted to commit suicide too, so I know what that feels like. What? You too? And you get it. So you get it. Okay, so now I feel free to talk to you about the things because you're not standing on a pedestal looking down at me and telling me what I should and should not do. Right? And stuff. And if I say this don't work for me, you're not going to shame me about it. You're going to say, okay, well, let's try this. Because we are individuals and we do like different things. And while I might be able to sit still, I heard somebody the other day said, I enjoy meditation, but I can't sit still and do it. So they do a walking meditation, right? So that's figuring out what works for him. Okay, you can't keep still. That don't mean you can't meditate. And so many people have not been into meditating because they think I have to sit with my legs in this position. And me too, because I'm like, I'm a chunky girl. I can't sit like I've never been able to sit crisscross applesauce since like I was 12. So I was like, so I can't meditate because I can't sit crisscross applesauce. And so getting rid of it has to be done in this particular way. There's a lot of strategies. There's a lot of ways. Let's figure out what works for you as an individual. Oh, you like music? Well, cool. Let's do a little music session. Oh, like I had one client that came that had been going through so much stuff back to back. And she showed up for therapy and said, do we have to talk about the stuff? I said, this is your hour. You do what you want to with it. And so she's like, can we have a jam session? Yes, we can have a jam session. What music would you like to play? And it still ended up being therapeutic. And so, because she listened to music that she found comfort in. She listened to music that made her feel good. And we talked about that. What about this makes you feel good? Like, what the words make you feel like? Like, all of that's therapeutic. And so, just changing the game of what is expected or what should be done and all that. The things we learn are a basis. It's a basis. And everything else, we can tweak all the stuff to make it individual for our clients. Because treatment is individualized, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, we are all individual.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Shawnell, it's been such a treat to have you. Is there
I enjoyed it.
anything that is just you're burning to be able to share or express that we haven't covered yet before we close off
Man,
for
I don't know.
today?
We covered a lot of stuff. I think this is
Yeah.
really, really good. I do want to encourage people. I have some Facebook groups, and there's something for everybody. And if you can't find something for you, let me know, because I will create another one. There's lots of cycle breaker Facebook groups. I call my people the cycle breakers because y'all are cycle breakers. And cycle breaking is hard, and it's hard to do by yourself. So support. We got black women's, black men, LGBTQ, foster and adoptive, single parents. What else I got in there?
Incarceration, cycle
Yeah,
breakers.
my incarceration cycle breakers, people of color, because I didn't
And
want
I'll
to
make
leave people
sure
of color out.
all of these will also be in the episode notes too, so people can just click on them.
Absolutely. Just click on it and get in there, answer your questions. You got to answer the questions, people. Answer the questions and follow the rules and stuff. But, like, yeah, we want to create a community where you have a safe space to talk amongst each other. And there'll be professionals in there to help, but it's your space. It's your space to be free and support each other in there. So that, and follow the podcast, man. I'm getting started. I'm excited.
Yeah. Oh, heck yeah. Well, thank you so much for everything that you do just in the bubble of your world and supporting people that really need it.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for having me. This was fun talk. Appreciate it.
yeah, absolutely.
What a great conversation with Shawnell, and such important work she is doing to bring access, awareness, and advocacy to marginalized and disenfranchised communities. If you are on YouTube, you are going to love the next video. If you're listening on a podcast, it's episode 13, which is a solo episode on reducing stress and strategy around processing emotions in a healthy way. As always, may you be the change you want to see in the world.